Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 1st of May, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today, we have Patrick Henningsen and Basil Valentine. Later in the programme, we're hoping to be joined by Heiko Khoo, who once again is going to be giving us an update on Palantir. Patrick is going to have more on King Charles' visit to the United States and also an update on Iran. And Basil will be reporting on the appeal into the lifting the prescription of Palestine Action and the situation with the global summit Flotilla. But we're going to begin with the Golders Green Stabbings because the alleged perpetrator, Asif Suleiman, has been charged with attempted murder following the stabbing of two Jewish men in Golders Green. I'll just bring them on screen here. The story is fascinating, not so much for the fact the two men were stabbed in London, because that happens practically every day of the week, but how this has been framed by the police, politicians and the media as an anti-Semitic attack. Now, Suleiman is described by the Met Police as a British national born in Somalia, so he's most likely Sunni Muslim, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the response from the Starmer regime has been immediate. It was labelled as an act of terror straight away. Starmer made an immediate statement, which he said, yesterday, Britain's Jewish community suffered yet another vile terrorist attack. Two men stabbed in broad daylight in the streets of Golders Green because they were Jews. Now, that's my emphasis on the graphic there. But he can't possibly have known what the motivation was when he made the statement, and I'm pretty sure he still doesn't actually know what the motivation was. But then yesterday, Shabana Mahmood raised the terror threat level to severe. The statement said that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, JTAC, was today. That was the 30th of April, yesterday, raising the UK national security threat from substantial, meaning an attack is likely, to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely in the next 6 months. We can maybe discuss how they might know that a little bit later, or an extra. But anyway, the increase in threat comes following the stabbing in North London, but it's not solely the result of that attack, they said. They said that the terrorist threat level in the UK has been rising for some time, driven by an increase in the broader Islamic and extreme right-wing terrorist threat from individuals and small groups based in the UK. And they said that while the UK national threat level set independently by JTAC reflects the terrorist threat in the UK, it comes against a backdrop of increased state-linked physical threats, which is encouraging acts of violence, including against the Jewish community. Now, Mahmood also announced £25 million funding for Jewish security, which brings the total this year to £58 million. And that was confirmed by Starmer following a meeting with Mahmood, Lamy and Mark Rowley, amongst others, yesterday. Mark Rowley being head of the Metropolitan Police, of course. Now, on top of that, Wes Streeting has announced that the government will provide a cash grant to the Hatzola charity to buy top-of-the-range electric ambulances to replace the fleet that was destroyed in the so-called anti-Semitic arson attack earlier this year. They say that new high-tech ambulances will be able to serve the local community. Which local community, though, might be the question to ask, which has been the victim of repeated appalling hate attacks in recent months and follows the latest utterly appalling stabbings in Golders Green yesterday, said the statement. And then on top of that is the announcement of a call for evidence by the newly instituted independent review into anti-Semitism in schools and colleges in England, which is led by Sir David Bell. Now, this was created in March. And for the avoidance of doubt, this is not the common purpose affiliated to David Bell we might have reported on in the past, but a career civil servant who's currently the Vice Chair of Skills England, which is an executive agency being set up within the Department of Education. So I'm going to leave it to you to decide how this can be described as an independent process. Now, Basil, I'm going to ask you for comment here, but I want to make it clear, of course, that I, and I'm sure we, condemn any physical attack on anyone on the basis of race or religion or any other kind of thing. But this looks to me like a massive psychological operation in the sense that, well, in fact, it's not just on the general public, but on the Jewish community themselves as well, because naturally, if any minority is told that they're being attacked because they are a minority, this is only going to amplify any ideas that they have, that they are under that kind of attack. But of course, for the wider British community, of course, we are being told that pretty much everything in this case, we've had a stabbing, as you know, there are many stabbings in London every day. But this has been framed in a particular way, which is clearly intended to lead people in a particular direction.
Hello, Mike. Yes, greetings, everybody. Really extraordinary events have come to pass this week. The attack itself, obviously, is appalling. 2 people were injured, but not killed, I'm pleased to say. There are 15,500 odd incidents of knife crime in London alone every year, and yet this one incident has been amplified out of all proportion. It was initially claimed that the individual that carried it out was somehow linked to HAYA, the supposedly Iran-backed terror group, but he's actually a Somalian ethnic individual who was known to prevent as early back as 2020 and who has a long history of severe mental health issues and violent disorder. Now, the claim, of course, would be that he was somehow recruited by Iran, though, of course, that's denied by the Iranian embassy and seems an extremely unlikely turn of events. He was also possibly linked to another knife altercation earlier in the day, which may or may not have involved Jewish people. Today, he has appeared in court. The whole thing has been blown up out of all proportion and is, of course, being used for overtly political ends. Very soon after what happened, a crowd appeared on the streets of Golders Green with Israeli flags and displaying freshly minted banners saying anti-Zionism equals terrorism. I'm not quite sure how they worked that one out. And, Netanyahu has attacked Keir Starmer. People are chanting Keir Starmer Jew harmer. I mean, I'm no fan of Keir Starmer, but I've got absolutely no idea what he's done to deserve that particular label. It absolutely dominated the news cycle for 48 hours. Even in Australia, perhaps we can put up the slide of a tweet by Caitlin Johnston, the Australian journalist, who was actually an expletive, which has been, I cut off the bottom of that slide for obvious reasons. But as she says, 2 Jewish people got stabbed by a mentally ill guy in the UK. No one died. There's no evidence that it was a hate crime or that it has any political relevance whatsoever. And yet it still dominated the news cycle way down here in Australia for a full day. Now, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would say, well, perhaps the whole thing had been staged in some way in order to produce this fallout. It looks like the phrase globalize the intifada is going to be made illegal under hate speech laws. We know that the Israel lobby and its supporters in the UK have long since wanted to see Palestine solidarity and anti-genocide marches, symbols, all expressions of opposition to the Israeli government outlawed for the specious claim that they cause people like this idiot to do what he did. But there's no connection between the two to any sane or rational person, Mike. But the fact that it's dominated the news in Australia, raises some very serious questions about our priorities. There was a chap stabbed to death, Finbar Sullivan, not far from Golders Green in Primrose Hill, North London, a couple of weeks ago. And crickets, that isn't treated as a terror attack. He was killed, horrendous, 21-year-old. So we've got very, very strange goings on here, Mike.
Absolutely. Do you think that there'll be some kind of opportunity here to, because you're going to be talking about the Palestine Action thing in a minute. Do you think there's any effort to somehow use this to influence the outcome of that case?
Well, it shouldn't do. I've been thinking about that. Strictly speaking, one nutter going berserk with a knife in Golders Green has got nothing whatsoever to do with the prescription of a direct action group. There's no meeting point on the Venn diagram, as it were. But there's a very concerted attempt, across the UK media, Sky News saying that the rot of anti-Semitism started with Jeremy Corbyn's elevation to leader of the Labour Party. He should sue, but he probably won't. And this claim that somehow opposing genocide puts the Jewish community in London in harm's way is total nonsense. But it is opportunistic to try and conflate the two, as you point out, Mike.
Yes. Patrick, let me welcome you to the program. Any thoughts on this before we move on?
Well, the first thing we've covered so many of these mass shootings, or I call them high-profile, politically charged events, be they shootings, stabbings, and so forth. In the UK, this is nothing new. I mean, you could put it under the general rubric of high-profile Muslims with knives. The London Bridge attack is one example. There's a whole bunch of others. And what we found is if you just wait and then the actual facts come out later, you find that there's quite a lot of things that you might ask questions like, was the assailant on SSRIs? Were they under the influence of drugs? Were they a known wolf? In other words, were they on the radar of the security services, Special Branch or MI5, the anti-terror squad? And that's often been the case with some of these high-profile, what they call terror attacks in the UK. And we could go into examples of that. Which mosque are they attending? Is that a mosque like, for instance, Finsbury Park, that have traditional ties to police informants, MI5, etc.? Could it be a radical preacher who's also tangential to those sorts of efforts with Chowdhury affiliated mosques and so forth, like we've seen in the past? So I would always be looking for these clues and asking those types of questions. But for the media, for the prime minister, for the government, everyone seems to be rushing with a narrative immediately that this is a terror attack, and it's because of people protesting Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza, the West Bank, and now South Lebanon, genocide on 3 fronts. So certainly should be a conversation to have there as well, alongside of this conversation. That's something I think people would like to see.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for that. Now let's change topics and move on to Palantir. And Patrick, we're starting off with this 21st Century Wire article, The Empire's Operating System, Palantir, AI War, and the Privatization of Sovereign Power.
Yeah, this is a fantastic analysis to really get into this subject. And of course, we'll hear more about this in a minute from our colleagues as well as our guest. But what this is basically, this is an unapologetic declaration, if you will, that by Alex Karp, that Silicon Valley now needs to reprioritize. So it's not about apps. It's now about defending the Western world, to defend the country. This needs to be the new purpose of the new muscular Silicon Valley. It's got some interesting overtones to it, comparable to other sort of muscular political extremist movements as well. So the other thing they're saying is this is now an obligation. This is now an obligation, and it really forms Palantir as this sort of arm of Western power. And it's absolutely extraordinary. So, I mean, I encourage people to look at this deep dive. We'll put a link in the show notes here. Another fantastic piece of work by Freddie Ponton on this topic. But this goes into a whole bunch of other companies as well that kind of fall under this category. But we can discuss more details on this with our colleagues and our guests.
Basil, let me ask if you've got any comments on this. Now, I've been watching Heiko making an attempt to connect, and he hasn't succeeded so far. So we'll just give him an opportunity here. But Basil, what are your thoughts?
Well, Palantir seem determined to hoist themselves with their own petard. A few months ago, what Patrick has outlined there was a conspiracy theory, but they're determined to lay out in front of us the extent to which they want to not only control our lives, but also determine who lives and who dies. Perhaps this, same logic will be extended to the National Health Service. Will Palantir make be involved in the death panel decisions that Bill Gates has championed in the past. This stuff only really needs to be brought to light for any sane, rational person to want to say that there's no place for this organization anywhere in UK government public life. And that campaign, I'm pleased to say, is growing, not just in Britain, but in other countries in Europe. Well, when they produce material like this, it's hardly surprising.
Yeah, unfortunately, Patrick, it looks like the technology's let us down on this one. But let's just move on to this article here then in Futurism. Palantir's CEO says legalizing war crimes could be good for business. Is he really doing that? I mean, he has said some pretty outrageous things in the last few months or so, but this has got to be the top of the pile.
This is what he is saying. This is where they're positioning the argument, and what they're. This is part of, you have to look at this as part of a much bigger, wider trend right now in the kind of defense tech. And if you look at all the new IPOs, if you look at where the money is being allocated for I can speak for the Pentagon, for instance, in the United States, it's all about military defense, AI defense, etc. Securing critical mineral supply chains, and then being able to. So war is about capacity. It's now about, it's quantified now. It's about capacity. It's about being able to sustain a long campaign and overwhelm your opponent with drone tech, for instance. It's about swarming. So this is how the industry is now positioning itself. But what's the most disturbing part of this manifesto is this absolute overt merger of state and corporate interests. And these will be a few corporations that are going to rise to the top of the pile, who are going to become very profitable and wealthy off the back of what is effectively, and I'll speak for the U.S. and you can maybe comment on Britain, but it's effectively deficit spending. It's the government going into debt to build out all of these massive new military technology arms, and that are specifically designed for constant conflict. So it's there's not this sort of reciprocal conversation about world peace, about diplomacy, about dialing down the tension. Instead, it's about accelerating. And we see this across politics. And I would say that this has taken over academia. I can speak for my alma maters, both of them, including Plymouth University, very much ensconced now into defense, into war applications. And this is right across the country in the UK as well. So that's where the money's flowing. So, of course, this is where the politics and the sort of political belief structures to justify this are being constructed. And that includes, the arming of the Arctic that we talked about before, Mike. But in terms of the Russia, Ukraine, European, or Britain versus Russia, Europe versus Russia, this is absolutely front and center. They believe that they will be able to eventually, through technology, overwhelm the Russian Federation and ultimately be victorious in a longer war of attrition. And that would include massive amounts of drone technology, sabotage, targeted assassinations, trying to bring the Russian government to a paralysis, if you will, by overwhelming it. And we're seeing this is what Ukraine has been tasked to do on behalf of the West. And then this is only the beginning. So it is very disturbing when you read into the fact that these companies are now front and center. In fact, they've made themselves indispensable to our governments in the West.
Yes. Well, Patrick, I'll just echo that, because the First Sea Lord was giving a speech to Russi yesterday, the day before, and he was basically saying, well, we don't need a navy anymore. This is supposed to be the man that represents the navy in this country, because really the warfare has changed, and we need to be building lots of drones. Now, Heiko has just appeared. Basil, do you just want to introduce Heiko and ask whatever questions you have?
Heiko is a long-standing human rights campaigner and activist, always to be found at Speaker's Corner. And I'm pleased to say he's championing the anti-Palantir cause and has a petition online for us to sign. So, Heiko, can you hear me now? Welcome to the program.
Just about hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Just tell us
Okay,
quickly
that's
where
fine then.
you... That's okay. We're a little short of time now, but just tell us quickly where you are and what people can do to support your campaign to end Palantir's involvement in UK government contracts.
I'm at the back of Palantir because I couldn't get an internet connection, so I had to come to get Wi-Fi off someone else. Basically, what we're asking people to do is to sign a petition to the campaign. Campaign should really be extended. What we're doing is Thursday afternoons at 4 o'clock outside Palantir quarters in the square. But they've got used to that, so they basically chaperoned people in and out. And I just noticed outside there a minute ago that there's quite a flurry of activity of people going in and out of there. They are extremely camera shy, despite the proclamations they make about being very keen on town square debates, or the internal debates is what they're talking about really. So what we need is a more regular campaign, basically even just a couple of people filming body going in and out of Palantir. I think that would serve a very useful purpose, because they're very shy, they're unwilling to be, if you like, even their friends and family. A lot of these people don't know they work at Palantir. And there has been some internals in particularly Wired magazine this week. There's the citations from various internal correspondence networks where some of them are asking, did we participate in the Midnight Massacre? How do we stop this in future? And others are questioning their role in Iraq in surveillance state. And so there is, all we really need is some proper internal resistance inside Palantir, like has happened in a number of other AI companies. On the other side, we should also note that Google this morning have stated they've entered into agreement with the Ministry of Defence. So we shouldn't, of course, just focus on Palantir, but Palantir is the centre of the global, if you like, demonic operation to seize control of the world's data for nefarious and evil purposes.
Well put, Heiko. Now, where can people find your petition?
StopPalantir.org, we put it, or they can find it on the parliamentary website. StopPalantir.org has just got the petition on it at the moment. Later, we'll be adding more material from various resources to allow people to access information and understand what's happening with Palantir and with the AI tech companies in general. I think there is a need now to extend this sort of focal point, DeepMind as well, because DeepMind, there is some 300 people who joined the trade union at DeepMind out of 1,300 staff. So that's quite a lot of people. So DeepMind have obviously decided they want to push the parameters of this and force through, must submit themselves to this defense AI related nexus established. But Palantir remains the core focus because it is the center of the whole evil operation.
Thank you, Heiko, for joining us from London. StopPalantir.org is the place to go.
Basil, Heiko, thank you very much for that. All the details will be in the show notes for Heiko's campaign, of course, and we would absolutely encourage everybody to get involved with that. Now, Basil, let's come on to the issue of Palestine Action. Everybody will know from our previous reporting and your previous reporting that the prescription of Palestine Action was lifted, but the government wanted to appeal that, and that appeal is now being heard.
Yes, that's right. The Court of Appeal is listening to the government's attempt to turn over the lifting of the ban on Palestine Action. And the presiding judge at the Court of Appeal is the Lady Chief Justice of the United Kingdom, Baroness Sue Carr. There she is, the first woman to hold that highest office, the number one judge in the whole of the UK. At the beginning of the trial, I'm pleased to say she referenced the letter signed by an increasing number, I think the latest count's about 1,700 famous people, scholars, university professors, celebrities of one sort or another, who've signed a letter rather than held up a placard saying, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. Now, she didn't have to do that at the beginning of this hearing. And the fact that she did would seem to indicate that she's aware of public opinion around this issue, put it that way. She will doubtless also be influenced by, if we can see the next slide, by the report, which appears to be entirely coincidental, from the government's own watchdog, which says that the ban is a risk to free speech. If we can cycle through these slides, Britain's terrorism watchdog on Wednesday of this week said the government risks stretching counter-terrorism laws beyond their original purpose. In his annual report examining the use of Britain's terrorism legislation in 2024, independent reviewer Jonathan Hall said the subsequent banning of Palestine Action had exposed real uncertainty over whether serious damage to property alone should qualify as terrorism. And here's the kicker. While he said it was unthinkable to remove property damage entirely from the legal definition of terrorism, he suggested lawmakers could narrow the test, for example, by requiring a risk to life, a national security dimension, or exclusion for non-violent protest. Now, lawmakers in this case, of course, refers to Baroness Carr, because her decision, I think, will be final. I think, having lost originally in the High Court, I think if they lose in the Court of Appeal, it'll be difficult for the government to go to the Supreme Court, where doubtless they will face Baroness Carr again. But I just want to draw attention to this, a national security dimension. That may be what the government tried to use against Palestine Action and its supporters. But there's no UK national security dimension to what Palestine Action do. There is, conceivably, if you want to stretch the definition, a national security dimension for Israel. So whether or not the government try and claim that Britain's and Israel's national security are so inextricably linked that that requires the upholding of the ban on Palestine Action, and whether or not Baroness Carr agrees with that opinion will be revealed in the coming days and weeks.
Thank you, Basil, for that. Patrick, let's move on then to international affairs and Iran.
Well, sure. The conversation right now, of course, is is there going to be a resumption of hostilities or not? That's the big question that everybody is waiting for. In fact, by the end of this program, we could be the West or the United States or Israel could be commencing attacks, resuming attacks on Iran. So that could happen at any time from now in the coming days or weeks. So that's the main thing. So we're going to be looking at some data points, one way or another, that might indicate what is likely to happen, and maybe if we have time for a discussion. But one of the data points I think here to pay attention to is the president has been briefed by CENTCOM, and we'll put this tweet up on screen about a short and powerful strike on Iran. So this coincides with reports that and statements from the Israeli Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, as well, that Israel stands ready and resolute, and they're waiting for the signal from the United States. That's what the Israelis are saying, literally. We're waiting for the green light from Washington. So we have a pattern of behavior here, which is that the last time the justification was that Israel struck first and the United States automatically had to follow behind them in order to make sure that U.S. troops weren't at risk. So they had to go in behind Israel. So that's basically a repeat of this situation. So we're literally back to square one here. So I've raised some points here. We'll bring those up on screen. Escalation signs. Firstly, one is military assets are being moved into position to the region. That is an expensive maneuver from the United States. Would they be doing this? Look at Ben Gurion Airport. There are dozens of C-130s, as well as, there were, as we reported last week, 3 carrier strike groups in the region. Now there's only 2. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Next is Israel's issuing threats to Iran. That is a indicator that it is very likely we're going to see a resumption of hostilities. The question is when and what form that's going to take. And then after that, we'll say Iran meeting with Putin in St. Petersburg. Now, that's you could look at that as a sign that Iran is expecting escalation and that Russia now wants to get involved in the conversation, possibly as a mitigating factor, knowing that the Trump administration, the Israelis, are ready to basically unload on Iran if the threats from the U.S. and Israel are to be taken seriously. So you can look at that two ways. And so it's a kind of I put an asterisk on the end of that. It's a two-way data point there. The other is Trump lobbying Herzog to pardon Netanyahu. Now, again, that could go both ways as well. One of them you can look at that is that Netanyahu needs this war. He needs this war to survive politically. That's the one way you can look. The other way you can look at that latest development is that if Netanyahu's pardoned, then the pressure's off him in terms politically anyway, and that kind of relieves him a little bit and gives him a little more breathing space. Possibly that could be a de-escalation. But Israel is very much locked into, I think, eliminating Iran as a potential threat either now or somewhere later down the road. Now, there's some de-escalation signs that could be interpreted as such. One is Trump immediately, there was a phone call with Putin. This is after the Iranian meeting with the Russians in St. Petersburg and Moscow. Now, that prompted, the question is who initiated this call? Was it Trump that initiated the call, or was it Putin? Okay. Certainly, you could look at that as a panic phone call from Trump wanting to kind of move in and create leverage with the Ukraine negotiations in order to somehow get a better concession or position from Russia vis-a-vis what they're planning to do with Iran, intelligence sharing, military coordination, etc. So there's two ways you can look at it. Now, this next data point is very interesting. Reported USS Gerald Ford was parked in the northern Red Sea, a very strategic, important position if there's going to be an attack on Iran. That aircraft carrier, that's the most advanced aircraft carrier, although it's been at sea 309 days, a new record, has been recalled to Norfolk, Virginia. So it's very expensive to have put it into the Red Sea to begin with, and then only to recall it a few days later for a long journey back to the United States. That leaves only 2 carrier groups. Is that enough to mount a major shock and awe campaign against the Iranians? And the other data point after that is interesting. German jibes at Trump over this war. So Merz is taking pot shots at Trump about how this has been a humiliation for the United States, how Iran has humiliated the U.S. So does that mean the Europeans are confident that they're looking at a potential climb down here and they're seeing weakness and trying to get an opportunistic political shot at Trump after all the criticism and insults that have been hurled at Europe from this administration? We'll see, especially over NATO. And then the last one is the United Arab Emirates leaving OPEC, or they're announcing they want to leave OPEC. That could be seen, of course, as a death knell to the petrodollar, but it also means that they're wanting to get a hold of some foreign currency. They need cash, and how they, is that's going to be in Chinese yuan if Iran still controls the Straits of Hormuz. So that's kind of alluding to a new economic reality in the Persian Gulf. That's one way you can look at that. So there's a lot of interesting clues here. Now, I just want to point out, if we can, here, this is a map. These are the U.S. military bases used to attack Iran. And so we have the bases, the blue are in the Middle East, and in and around the Middle East, as well as mobile assets. And then the red are European and then outside of the Middle East, the red dots here. But if we zoom in a little bit closer, what I want to pay attention to is these ones. And I'm just going to throw this out because, Germany, the UK, Portugal, Greece, Kosovo, I'll put in that category, as well as Cyprus. But these are EU countries, or within Europe or within NATO for the most part. Kosovo is not really a real country, but we digress. So the question is anybody really attacking Iran seriously over the retaliatory strikes against the Gulf states that housed U.S. bases? And the answer is no, because they really don't have a leg to stand on, because those Arab countries in the Gulf states allowed their countries to be used as launch pads for an attack, an illegal war of aggression against Iran. So how is Europe any different? Germany specifically, Ramstein and Stuttgart. And I'll just add here, we'll just look at these. These are the three bases. We'll bring these up on screen here. Ramstein, very key in terms of attacks on Iran. Ramstein in Germany, also Sigonella in Italy, and Suda Bay in Greece. Okay, U.S. could not have engineered this war, could not have run operations without the European bases, including the UK, for the bombers, the B-1, B-2 bombers that we reported. So if Iran retaliated against these European countries to hit U.S. bases, whether they're NATO or not, what exactly could Germany, Britain, or any of these European countries do in response? And the answer is almost nothing, because the United States is NATO, and they're already unleashing the full power of the U.S. military on Iran. So what I'm saying is the European countries are putting their own populations at risk. This is only a question of missile capability, being able to go a few more 1,000 kilometers. That's it. The European countries are not, so they're a party to this war. They're co-belligerents in enabling an illegal war against Iran, and they're putting their own, in the future, they could be putting their own populations at risk. They might be getting away with it now because of the level or range of Iranian missiles, but not forever. So I think that's just a point I want to make, Mike, that is a conversation that we should have on this topic. Maybe we can discuss that further. But just to add quickly, the the Trump administration is really under stress right now, trying to defend this. The longer they sit in waiting for a response, the longer they sit idle, the more political flack that's coming in Washington. Here's a clip from the self-styled Secretary of War really getting grilled on the pretext, the justification for this war to begin with. It's absolutely amazing what's happening.
Who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon, and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that ensures they never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the...
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
My time for
we're
just
watching
a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of missiles.
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so that
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them, so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
and yet
to ensure their conventional shield was brought
one
to
other
heel,
question,
which we've done.
if I could get to it. So on.
So just panic from Hegseth. Meanwhile, Trump is tweeting out things like this, and literally putting out QAnon memes. That's the president of the United States is putting out QAnon memes. That's where the Trump administration is at. But if you look at the polls right now in terms of the economy, it's just all bad news. I mean, one after the other here. His numbers on inflation, worse than Jimmy Carter's in terms of public approval. The national debt has exceeded 100% of the GDP for the first time since 1946. Down there, Frank Luntz, the guru of American polling, saying here on the bottom left-hand corner, the share of Americans who say their financial situation is getting worse, 55%, is higher now than any point in the last 25 years. And then finally, the U.S. GDP grew only 2%. That's way below the 2.2 or 2.5 projections, and that's from last quarter. So at the end of February, first week of March, it's the next quarter. When those numbers come out, the end of May, they're going to be much worse. We could see reports of less than 2% GDP in the U.S. So this is the conversation right now in America going in the run-up to the midterm elections. It's just going from bad to worse for this White House.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Patrick. We will undoubtedly be talking more about that in extra, but let's move on then. If you like what the UK column does, we do need your ongoing support. You can join us as a member. Details on the website there. Don't forget the magazine is out, has been out for a couple of weeks. If you haven't got your copy yet, please pick one up or a ticket for the 20th anniversary event in September this year. Let's just move on quickly to Germ tonight. Ian Davis is Germ's guest at 7 p.m. On defining multipolarity. So join them for that at 7. And at 9, Carl is talking about China's economy. Well, it's finally happened. They managed to nail me to a chair to sit in front of Jake. So the first episode of 1,000 Words is on Sunday at 7 p.m. with me. So join us for that if you can. Basil, let's come back to you then. And the Flotilla.
Yes, I had arranged to speak to Dr. Frank Romano at this point in today's program. We had a very amicable conversation on Wednesday, but unfortunately, Frank, one of the organizers of the Global Samud Flotilla, which has been taking medical equipment, drugs, water, which is in very short supply, and food, of course, to Gaza, has been intercepted by the Israelis off Greece. We heard from Vanessa on Wednesday about how appalling the conditions in Gaza are, with rat-infested tents, nothing to eat, not enough water. And so this humanitarian mission set out from Barcelona last week with the intention of breaking the siege of Gaza, but unfortunately, it was intercepted by the Israeli Navy in international waters off the coast of Crete, believe it or not, a long way away from Palestine. And if we can go to the next slide, that shows, we'll do, first of all, let's see, we've got some footage from Al Jazeera of the boats being raided in the middle of the night.
Laying around them. So they are
This is just a straight up attack on civilians in international waters, unarmed civilian boats, hundreds of miles from Israel, are being surrounded and threatened at gunpoint. That's not security, it's the use of military force against civilians in international waters. This is illegal under international law. Israel has no jurisdiction in these waters. Intercepting or boarding these vessels would amount to illegal detention, potentially kidnapping on the high seas.
This is the Israeli Navy. Attempts to breach. Any further attempt to sail toward Gaza places your safety at risk and leaves the IDF no choice but to... Attempts to breach the lawful maritime security blockade of the Gaza Strip constitute a violation of international law. If you wish to deliver or maintain aid to Gaza, you may do so through established and recognized channels. Please change your course and return to your port of origin.
So thanks to Al Jazeera for that. If we can go to the next slide, we can see exactly where they were intercepted, which is off the coast of Crete in international waters. There's no disputing the fact that this, in spite of what the IDF bloke was saying on his radio there is a violation of international law. We go to the next slide. The Jerusalem Post here reporting that Mamdani is one of the few politicians in Europe or the United States to openly state that this is a brazen violation of international law. And for all that he's best buddies with Donald Trump now, the Trump administration have condemned the flotilla, calling it a pro-Hamas initiative and a baseless, counterproductive effort to undermine President Trump's peace plan, believe it or not. Now, 6 Australian citizens are being deported to Greece as I speak, amongst them Annie Makotau, who said her boat had been forced to participate in the search and rescue effort to find stranded boats and passengers after the flotilla was intercepted. Many have been broken, engines destroyed and rigging cut, she said. Some, like the Tam Tam, one of the boats, have passengers. Political pressure needs to be put on the US, Australia, Greece, and the rest of the world. But unfortunately, I can't see that happening because, anti-Semitism and all that.
Indeed, Basil, indeed. Okay, let's move on then to the OPCW because, Britain's... let's move on to Dr. Brendan Whelan here, one of the OPCW whistleblowers that Piers Robinson has been writing about on the UK Column website, has won his 6-year legal battle against the OPCW, that's the Organisation for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. And this was after challenging the manipulation of the investigation into the so-called chemical weapons attack in Douma in 2018 in Syria. Now, the full story is on Aramate's Substack here, and I absolutely encourage everyone to read the article there. It's published under his own name. Now, Brendan Whelan took the case to the International Labour Organisation's Administrative Tribunal, which is the independent judicial body that's based in Geneva that resolves employment disputes between international organisation officials and employers such as the OPCW. The tribunal has ordered the OPCW to lift sanctions against Whelan, reverse his lifetime employment ban, and pay him damages and legal costs. Now, Brendan Whelan, for those who don't know, is an organic chemist who served with the OPCW for more than 16 years. He was part of the advance team that was sent to Douma in Syria in April 2018, and he was the chief author of the investigation report. The OPCW's official report, which came out in March 2019, concluded that there were reasonable grounds to believe, quotes, a chemical attack had taken place. The US State Department then cited that report as vindication for missile strikes. That was in the first Trump administration. And then later in 2019, an internal engineering study was leaked, which contradicted the official findings. And so Brendan Whelan absolutely was not in agreement with what the OPCW had finally put out. So he and a colleague were placed under suspicion for having leaked the engineering report. And that was despite the fact that Whelan had already left the organization. But anyway, the OPCW Director General briefed member states. The investigation had cleared both inspectors of leaking the document, and yet the chief of the OPCW said that they had deliberately enabled the leak. He described their concerns as erroneous, uninformed, and wrong. And then Brendan Whelan received a letter of censure and a lifetime ban from OPCW employment. Of course, the usual suspects, The Guardian, Reuters, Bellingcat, and so on, they all came out and said that the official narrative was absolutely definitive, and they described the inspectors' concerns, Brendan Whelan's concerns, as Russian disinformation. Now, Brendan Whelan took the case to the tribunal, and during the proceedings, the OPCW abandoned its original charges and substituted new ones. They accused him of breaching confidentiality by writing to the Director General and forwarding an internal email to a senior director. But in doing so, the OPCW made the first official acknowledgement of a June 2018 meeting in which German toxicologists had ruled out chlorine gas as the cause of the victims' deaths in Douma. And that expert evidence had been omitted from the final report as just one example. The tribunal, as I say, ruled that the OPCW had failed to notify Dr. Whelan of the charges, denied him the full investigation report, and committed a manifest error in violating due process. And so after 6 years, Brendan Whelan seems to be vindicated. Now, the OPCW has to now lift the sanctions. In the article, he does say that it probably isn't going to be going back to work for them, but nonetheless, they are required to lift the sanctions, including the lifetime ban on him working for them again. And of course, the questions into the official reports still remain. The judgment is available, and the link to that will be on the show notes. And for more on the background to this case, do read Piers Robinson's articles on the UK Column website. And also take a look at the Berlin Group 21 website, which Piers set up a number of years ago with others. This includes letters written to the United Nations Security Council and the OPCW Executive Committee highlighting the allegations that the OPCW still need to answer, including that they falsified their report. Undoubtedly, we'll talk more about that in extra as well. But Patrick, let me come back to you again and a little bit more on King Charles' visit to the United States.
Well, there's a lot of symbolism here, and we'll delve into some of this. But I kind of put this under the general heading of, looking in on the colonies. The king has come to check up on this special relationship, which is wavering a bit, or is a little bit shaky. There, you can see him. Charles and Camilla there holding court at the U.S. Congress. Not as many standing ovations, however, as Benjamin Netanyahu got. But this is Trump taking the opportunity to troll the opposition here. Two kings the White House are putting out there. So that's just fueling the fire for the opposition here. But watch this clip and this major violation of protocol here. We'll discuss this more in extra, but go ahead and watch how Trump basically runs right in front of Camilla in order to shake hands with all of Jeffrey Epstein's friends. I mean, so we'll leave that. We'll leave the replay. We have a replay slide for that. We'll leave that for extra because I would love to hear Basil's comment on this. But extraordinary scene here. But let's get down to the real points. These are the sticking points that Charles basically identified and leveled quite a bit of criticism against Trump. Much of it veiled here. Obviously, the importance of NATO. This is something this administration seems to be. Degrading NATO, hurling insults at the Europeans. Charles has come to try to steady that ship a little bit more. Standing with Ukraine. Donald Trump's not doing enough to stand with Ukraine. This is something that the king and, of course, Britain are very, very dedicated to standing with Zelensky in Ukraine. And this was the one here, which is a warning on executive power. And we have this clip, and this, I think, is the most important bit. He's basically really taking a jibe at Trump, but getting a massive reaction from the Congress in Charles's favor on this. Apparently, Donald Trump's reportedly very jealous about the wit and the success of the speech by King Charles. If we have this, let's play that.
The founding fathers were bold and imaginative rebels with a cause. 250 years ago, or as we say in the United Kingdom, just the other day, they declared independence. By balancing contending forces and drawing strength into diversity, they united 13 disparate colonies to forge a nation on the revolutionary idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They carried with them and carried forward the great inheritance of the British Enlightenment, as well as the ideals which had an even deeper history in English common law and Magna Carta. These roots run deep, and they are still vital. Our Declaration of Rights of 1689 was not only the foundation of our constitutional monarchy, but also provided the source of so many of the principles reiterated, often verbatim, in the American Bill of Rights of 1791. And those roots go even further back in history. The US Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances.
The president has not got a reaction like that from both sides of the House. So extremely jealous of what King Charles was able to pull off there. We'll talk about that more in extra. But the other is protecting the environment. And Trump has basically deregulated and opened the doors for a massive corporate rampage in terms of allowing Monsanto and Roundup and all these sort of things that were previously basically scheduled for extinction. Trump has breathed new life into the sort of chemical industry and environmental degradation and so forth, and lifting moratoriums on drilling in protected areas and so forth. So they're clashing on that. And of course, at the end, the last is the special relationship. Statements made by the president against Britain or not supporting the British government in the way that previous administrations had done. This is disturbing and worrying for the king, and he's again wanting to right the ship on that issue as well. So again, we can talk more about some of these points during the extra, and I'm sure we will. But to me, it was just an incredible scene of the symbolism of having the British king come in and basically upstage the president in the Anglosphere like that is, to me, very, very significant.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Patrick. Thank you. Basil, let's end the program then. Take your time with it in case you missed it.
Yes, thanks, Mike. A few stories, some funny, some not so funny. Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, was asked what he would say to King Charles when Charles came to New York, and he said he was going to ask him to return the Koh-i-Noor diamond. I don't know whether he did or not. It's supposedly worth about £1 billion, forms part of the crown jewels. I can't see the British royals giving that one up anytime soon. Of course, it comes originally from India, from the subcontinent. Next, now, this is one of the, perhaps expected ramifications of the attack on Iran and the war, which is that Saudi Arabia looks like pulling the funding from the Live Golf Tour. Star players are going to have a difficult road back to the PGA with no Saudi funding. The whole thing was built on Saudi funding. So I wonder whether these, some of the most privileged people on the planet, really professional golfers, and naturally conservative, I wonder whether it will cause them to furrow their brows with respect to the Trump administration, because this is all as a result of the attack on Iran, where in some sectors of Saudi society, anyway, including the upper echelons, there is considerable sympathy for their Muslim neighbors in spite of the traditionally entrenched positions both countries hold. They did, after all, strike a peace agreement a couple of years ago. So looks like Liv is going to be dead and buried. And Trump himself had been quite invested in Liv. He was all in favor. He owns golf courses around the world, as you know. So quite an interesting story there. Now, Sophie Corcoran, not everybody's cup of tea. She appears regularly on GB News. She is suing a charity, the Interns Foundation, which works with people from underrepresented groups, because they don't offer internships to white people. She thinks she's got a strong case, but the Bar Council has said the scheme is lawful positive action under sections 158 and 159 of the Equality Act, based on evidence of underrepresentation in relation to access to the profession. So it remains to be seen how that one goes. Perhaps that'll end up before Baroness Carr as well before long. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised by the next story. The poorest areas in Britain have seen healthy life expectancy drop by a whopping 20 years over the last quarter of a century. Successive governments being blamed for England's declining health. Throughout the period since the Second World War, life expectancy had increased. The population generally got healthier, but not anymore, it seems. All sorts of reasons for this, obesity being one, huge spike in cancer rates compared to our parents' generation. Wonder what that's all about. And of course, income and living standards directly linked to how long you're likely to have to live. Blackpool apparently is where your life is likely to be at its shortest, and unsurprisingly, it's down in leafy Surrey where you're likely to live the longest. Next up, a couple of books which I recommend. I'm going to buy them myself. How to Sell a Genocide, The Media's Complicity in the Destruction of Gaza by Adam Johnson, and covering what appears to be much the same ground, Don't Say Palestine, How the Media Manufactured Consent for Genocide by Asal Rad. And as I say, I'm going to get those. I think there's an enormous amount of genocide denial amongst Israel supporters on social media, amongst the chattering classes, wherever they get the chance, the likes of Julia Hartley-Brewer, all the usual suspects, Douglas Murray, all the shills say, there's no genocide, there's no genocide. So I think it's important to be well informed about the events of the last few years in order to counter such narratives effectively. And I hope that those books will help. And interesting that both are talking about the media, and the media so quick to amplify the gold is green, but silent about genocide. Now, this is extraordinary stuff. The Times of Israel reporting that to see Jews as equals is anti-Semitic because they're the only people based on assignment, people with a capital P, and they're divinely, with a capital D, ordained task is to be exemplary to all of humanity, to be God's ambassadors on earth, fighting for the good of everyone. And the idea that Jews should be no different than Gentiles already implies opposing Jews, as if Jews should adjust to majority norms, integrate and assimilate away. That's an opinion piece in the Times of Israel published recently. And finally, this week, Donald Trump is being urged to declare American and not English the official language of the United States ahead of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. I wonder what King Charles would make of this. Writer Rob Lockwood, former advisor to Doug Burgum, joined Fox and Friends to discuss his Washington Post op-ed calling for the US to adopt its own language. Enough with English. Enough with American English. Let's call it what it is. American, Lockwood said. And judging by the garbage that comes out of a lot of Americans' mouths, present company accepted, of course, Patrick, he might have a point.
Well, I think it's much more likely if he's going to rename the language, he's going to call it Trumpian or something. But anyway, we'll talk about that in extra as well. We're going to leave it there. Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Patrick. And thanks to everybody that's been watching. Don't forget Jeremy and Carl's discussions tonight. 1,000 Words podcast on Sunday. But join us for the news again on Monday. As usual, have a great weekend and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.